Claire spent a lot of time with me. And, you know, I watched him work because they work from your computer remotely.
Right.
So I saw all the stuff that he did, what it took to get me set up. And he reestablished me on everything. You know, I was getting at all of the Outlook and all that stuff. So
Okay.
it's, I'm concerned there's sabotage because this stuff just keeps happening. There's no reason for things to change like this, unless they're doing a major overhaul and moving servers around and not taking care of business on all the servers. But that is something that they would have announced, and we would all be aware that there could be possible problems.
Okay. I will let Justin know. I'll send him an email about that. Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've
Good
got
morning.
Michael and Angela's going to join us here in just a moment. And Ken. And I don't think after that we'll be waiting for anybody else. I'm gonna step away. I'll be back in like less than a minute. Mr. Spada, I'll be right back.
All right. Go for it. Brenda, I think we have everybody, right? Other than Andrew just stepping away.
We do.
Everybody else is here? Okay. Then maybe while Andrew comes back, we can start, and then at least we can do the roll and get the meeting going. So I'll call the meeting to order. It is 10:02 on May 10th.
Okay.
And please
Okay.
take the roll.
Thank you. Member Weiner?
I am here.
Thank you. And Chair Cepeda?
Here.
Thank you. Next item is public comments. I did not receive any written comments on items on the agenda. And I do see some attendees. If there are any attendees in this webinar that would like to speak under public comment, if you can please raise your hand. Seeing none raised, we do not have public comments. And if I can go to the next item. Next item is matters from staff and general manager. Minutes, accept the minutes of the March 8th, 2022 Infrastructure, Operations, and Environment Committee meeting.
So moved.
Using the wrong mouse to unmute. All right, then it passes.
Thank you. The minutes have been accepted. Thank you. The next item is an update on the climate action plan.
Thanks, Brenda. In the attendees section, we've got Angela and Judy and Tim. Tim has to come over. He's going to be doing most of the discussion and presentation, and Judy probably might want to answer some questions if they come up. Angela is going to have a comment or two at the end. And who else got Dalvin? Okay. Ready to go then. See what I wrote down. Did I write down anything to help me out? No. Okay, we got Tim. There he is. We got Tim here today to help us with the climate action plan summary and update. And just as a real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim. He's going to talk a little bit about the climate action plan and what their purpose is and what ours actually says. And then a little bit about amendments and updates that we won't be amending the existing climate action plan for a little while, but we will be providing an update to the action plan and then providing some more regular reports. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about that and about that process. The biggest part of the implementation has been the Clean and Green project, which is currently underway, which is going to make a huge dent in our greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really been the primary focus. And then there have been some other changes with COVID around transportation that we can revisit and take a look at that and figure out how we're going to appropriately track that. But a lot of commuting, I mean, here we are in our virtual meeting, and many of us didn't travel into the office today. So in theory, transportation and the impacts from that are down. Whether that's real or not in the larger scheme, I don't know. But as far as for the impact of our agency and whether or not we drove our vehicle to get to work, it is true. And so that's the kind of thing that we'll be tracking. But I'm just going to leave it there for right now and turn it over to Tim to kind of do that summary and talk about where we'll be going with it. And then we're certainly available for questions and discussion.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all again. Yeah, so there are three companion documents. There is the Climate Action Plan. There is a baseline study that has been completed. And then there's an actual action plan that has not been completed because a big part of the action plan would have been to complete a comprehensive retrofit of the wastewater treatment facility. And the Clean and Green, as it's called, was developed in parallel with the Climate Action Plan and the greenhouse gas baseline. So it kind of got put in front of actually developing the plan, because we know it's going to be part of the plan. So it includes solar and all of the things that would normally be in an action plan. The Climate Action Plan, and I wish the name Climate Action Plan and Action Plan were different enough that they didn't sound the same, but until we rename it, I'm going to have to keep trying to differentiate them like that. The Climate Action Plan itself is what was adopted by the board, and they're really, it has some very high level overarching goals that the board has agreed to, and they have directed staff to do a couple of things in order to achieve these goals. That Climate Action Plan will not be updated. It is the plan, and it says that the district will be carbon neutral or carbon negative by a certain period of time, and it's relatively short and relatively straightforward. What's more complex are the baseline and the actual action plan, the thing that tells us what we're going to do. So the Clean and Green is addressing a lot of the energy efficiency and self-generation, and it's addressing one of the biggest things. And let me back up a little bit. The baseline has outlined what your emissions are in several different categories. One of the biggest categories you had was that you have been storing sludge in a holding pond. And then when it would get to a certain point, it would dry over time, but then you would just scoop it up and take it to a dump. This Clean and Green is going to address energy efficiency. It's going to address on-site generation. Plus, it is addressing that storage of that sludge. And it's reducing your emissions from those three things significantly. Then once, and the Clean and Green is also a very big and somewhat overwhelming project. It has a lot of the district staff is spending a lot of time working on it. And there is a large team of consultants that have been hired by the district that is spending a lot of time on it. And there is a large team of contractors that have been hired by the district that's spending a lot of time on this. So as I said, it kind of, it's a part of what would be the action plan, but it's a very big project. And as of yet, it's kind of superseded developing the action plan itself. The action plan itself would include some additional things. It would include commute. It would include addressing things related to your fleet, and probably some other things that are escaping the top of my mind. Some of those things, the beauty of not having done the plan yet is that some of those things are being addressed and potentially solved as we speak with, as Andrew said, that, we look at how we commute differently now. Plus, the prevalence of electric vehicles. There are now electric trucks, and there are electric tractors, and there are electric, everything out there, and they're not quite ready. But and so if we developed a plan right now, we could say, well, you need to get electric trucks. But as since we're focusing on the clean and green, it will probably be a little while before the action plan is developed. And at that point, there should be more clarity on trucks and commute. The last part is the actual tracking of where you started and where you end up. And as I said, there is a baseline study. And what should happen is, periodically that we update that study and can then compare where you started to where you are in the future. It's been, I don't think I have it up, but it's been probably over a year since that baseline was developed. You could do it again, but we know that the clean and green isn't done. So we have not addressed the sludge. We have not addressed the energy use at the facility yet. So the change is probably going to be relatively nominal, and it might be up, it might be down. We don't know, but we could do that. But again, the clean and green project is a pretty I won't say overwhelming, but it's a very comprehensive project that's taken a lot of time, and it's probably best to focus on that. And then in the near future, as construction gets going, it will likely take a little bit less of staff time, and that might be an appropriate time to start actually looking at what other things you can add to your action plan.
Tim,
go ahead.
Do you mind if I add in right here? You want to? Okay. So I want to just a number of points that Tim made in referring to the action plan and the baseline, and that's really what we'll be working on over the next number of months is formulating a regular updates to the action plan that we come back and report on, and developing those reporting procedures and how we monitor that against the baseline. What we need to be cognizant about and pay close attention to now is making sure that we're able to track those reductions. We have a good baseline, and then we can have that study, but some of the interval reporting is you don't necessarily go back and do the entire emission study for the agency again, but you calculate it out and you say, okay, we've now purchased 10 electric vehicles, which reduces our emissions by approximately X%. And those are the kinds of things we want to be able to start to be reporting out on a more regular basis. And if I can call this up for just a second, let me see if I can screen share. I'll show a piece of the, there it is. Okay, I got too many things. Where'd it go? All right, I got to clear my deck here. I'm going to share here in just a moment. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get too many on this screen and it's hard to add it up. Oh, there it is. It was hiding from me. I moved it out of my way so I could find it easily. Okay, is the can you see what I'm sharing?
No.
Oh, there it is.
You got
No, I
it?
can't yet.
There we go.
I don't know why it wasn't. Anyway, there we go. So just as an example, and we could go into any number of the details, but when Tim mentioned that the plan isn't, in line, that we're going to do quote an update or an amendment to the climate action plan itself, they can get reviewed much like a general plan or any of these other larger plans, that control planning efforts. And they'll get reviewed, and if it needs to be updated, it will, and you put a new date on it, say you checked everything. Maybe there's some significantly new things that have come up that need to be addressed that weren't contemplated. But most of that can actually be addressed through the action plan. And you can see, for example, here in this section where we talk about potential actions for greenhouse gas reductions. And then you go down here to fleet. It's pretty comprehensive. Okay, fleet reductions, 0 to 100%. Actions, replace all fleet vehicles, low carbon fuels, implement the diesel idling, et cetera, and commute. So much of that is already there in the plan. And the fact that now the conditions are different with COVID, there's a different environment. What that'll do is will allow us to work more on the support alternative work schedules and work at home programs. Much of these ideas and things that we were planning to do have been accelerated due to COVID. And COVID has done that across the board on so many changes in workplace environments and in our lives, period, that have just been accelerated. So that's what he's talking about in the concepts of that plan itself. The climate action plan is not what's going to be updated so much, but rather making sure that we have good tracking procedures and methods of working against the baseline and updating the action plan. But the single biggest action right now is when we complete the project at the plant, it's about 95% of our greenhouse gas emissions that had been generated at the plant will be gone, which is I don't know what that translates to agency-wide, but it's probably up over 50% or more of the entire agency greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the focus, but we'll be working on the rest of these and coming up with a little bit more of an action plan in the next number of months and report back. So Tim, I hope that wasn't too disruptive to your presentation, but I thought maybe a specific example of what we're talking about would be helpful.
I think that was good. I was more or less done with, unless you thought I needed to expand on anything. That was more or less what I had to say is that we still need to essentially do the action plan. And within the action plan will be a plan to compare it back to our original baseline study. And within that would be also a plan to regularly report back to either this committee or the board directly to demonstrate the accomplishments of the plan.
Well, I think one thing, Tim, to elaborate on, and if anybody wants to look at a particular part of the plan, I can leave it up here right now. But how do we track? And for example, on the Clean and Green project, we say we're going to reduce significantly these greenhouse gas emissions. What does that look like? What is the those calculations, and how do we verify those? And when we do a regular update, say a yearly update in a year or two, and we've reduced by 40% from our baseline, and the next year we managed to get a couple more percentage points. It's going to get like that after we get past this Clean and Green project. It'll be moving from 60% reduction to 63% reduction. They're going to get a lot smaller and a lot harder to get to. So the action plan will actually become a little more complicated and a little more detailed to try to address these smaller items. But what is, we make those calculations and we make estimates, but then how frequently should they be verified against another agency-wide survey to go against the baseline? And what's the typical process for that?
Well, the action plan will include a measurement and verification plan. The measurement and verification plan can say once a year, once every 2 years, we will essentially you're going to redo that baseline. Obviously, you don't need all the words that are around it. It's more of comparing numbers. Very, very simply, for example, is within the baseline, there's a measurement of how much gasoline was used by fleet vehicles, or we could be talking about natural gas used by buildings or electricity used by buildings. They're all essentially the same. That's a number, you know how many gallons of gasoline were used by, you look at your records and you pull up how much gasoline was used, or electricity or natural gas. And each of those has a very simple conversion factor. So it's how much you used by this conversion factor, and you get the answer. And that needs to be done every couple of years at least. The action plan is different in that what we'd say is you have 12 vehicles. We're going to replace all of them over a 15-year period. Well, 2 years from now, how many have we replaced? And we can do the math. We can say, if we replace 2 of them, that means, if we replace half of them, that means half of your gasoline should be gone. But is that really true? So in our plan, we are going to be able to do the math that says, here's how we see your gasoline use going down over this period of time where it should reach 0 and it should be 0. Well, then we implement all of that. We need to make sure that you're not buying gasoline, essentially. And the same thing with the electricity. The plan will have projections, but once every couple of years, we will get all of the baseline data and redo the baseline, just the table part of that, the quantities part of it. Is that address that, Andrew?
I think so, but if there's questions, we'll certainly answer those. And what I called up here on this part of the plan is also what Tim was talking about, is that the plan calls out that we create the action plan and the specific set of actions. But as this was being written, it was contemplated that the first step would be to review the whole comprehensive energy project, which is of course now our clean and green project. Well, there you go. We'll go back and update the action plan because we have to change that name. The clean and green project, and then naming those major significant things. Now, the in parallel part, looking into some of these others, the potential to use more solar, the transition of passenger vehicles to all electric. These are what we're talking about. That's going to take some more time now, some effort to think about how are we going to do some of these things and start to create more of that action and implementation plan for these other bits and pieces, which will be significant once they're cumulative.
Yeah, and one thing also to highlight is as you get closer to 0, the cost per unit of greenhouse gas reduction typically goes up. And so, the plan will include a lot of things that are expensive. Well, the clean and green is expensive too, but as we go on, there may be some things that are very, very expensive to get done, but we will, the plan will also evaluate life cycle costs of actions that are in the plan.
Okay. So I don't think we have any more to specifically present. We'll come back, like I said, with an update as we go further into developing the actual more details of the action plan for other areas. But I'd be happy to address or answer any questions that you may have.
Director Wiener, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. Tim, can you remind me of, are you a consultant or an employee of the district?
A consultant with Kenwood Energy.
Oh, Kenwood Energy, okay.
What Tim does is he does help with us on support of the Clean and Green project that came through. He was our number cruncher, taking a look at all the claims made by ENGIE about what they would reduce and how they would reduce them. He'll help us review aspects of those submittals as they come from ENGIE, and then is available to help on a variety of other environmental and energy related issues such as this, the climate action plan. He'll be helping, working with staff, with Judy and I and other staff as we start to put this together.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, you described the process of conversion of gasoline usage, electricity usage, etc., to a number, and that number is what we're going to track. So what is that number called? Is it?
It is metric tons of greenhouse gas emitted.
And is it specific to CO2, or is it any greenhouse gas?
It's anything. Every gas gets converted to, I should change what I said. It's metric ton, equivalent metric tons of CO2 is what it is converted to.
Okay.
So even if you have methane emissions, they convert the greenhouse gas effect of methane to carbon dioxide, so that we can use one number.
Yeah, so now I can talk intelligently about that number. Thank you. So metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So then the reports would track, we start off with X number of metric tons of CO2. And the interesting thing about that baseline report, to me, the most interesting thing was that most of the greenhouse gases that we emit originated from the atmosphere and were converted by humans into sewage, which then was converted by bacteria into greenhouse gases. And so that's kind of like, that says to me that we're, that any energy that we acquire out of our inputs and any greenhouse gases that we reduce are not all equivalent. Some of them are like part of the natural cycle of food to waste, to food to waste, to food to waste. And all of that CO2 came out of the atmosphere by green plants, which we consume or our meat consumes. And that was what the report told me. Is that an accurate assessment of what the report had to say, the baseline?
Yes is a short answer. The longer answer is that the table in there that I think is table 1.2 is the emissions that are not part of that natural cycle. The process of tracking greenhouse gases and of creating a baseline attempts to account for that natural cycle and make it so that it does not imply that you are responsible for greenhouse gas emissions that are part of a natural cycle.
Right. That was the big takeaway I got. And that was very surprising well, not surprising, but it did adjust how I was thinking about the issue of greenhouse gas emissions and where, what we need to do to remove CO2 generated that comes from other sources. And that's kind of like, I guess, our main goal, to get the energy to replace fossil fuels, for example, and burning fossil fuels for our energy. If we recover energy from our systems, from our inputs, then we will automatically be reducing CO2 from natural gas, for example, or however our energy is generator. Is that kind of the idea?
Yes.
Great. And so is there, is this a common tracking the CO2 in this manner? Is this common across all organizations that are trying to reduce their footprint, their CO2 footprint?
Yes, there are standard protocol that are followed in developing this type of plan, and especially this table that you see 1.2.
And where does that and who is the lead on that? Who comes up with all that?
Tim, I'll respond to that first. Director Weiner, that would be in this case, our consultant Sage, who generated that baseline report, because it is there are standard protocols, and they factor in. And what have we got up here? If I had the transportation one up, for example, say we replaced 2 of our trucks that were diesel trucks with an electric truck, they would use the calculations to say, okay, you had 2 trucks that were removed, you were averaging 4,000 miles per month or per year, whatever the calculus is, and now you're utilizing this electric vehicle instead of that. They would do the calculations to translate that and say that has reduced your greenhouse gas metric tons, equivalent metric tons, by X number. And they have a whole series of formulas and protocols that have been developed. And I don't know what the agency is that certifies that process, Tim, but that's why we.
Yeah, the Sage used the IPCC. There are others, but they're all similar. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's an international panel that gives direction on how this should be done.
Yeah.
Right.
So that not each agency isn't making this up and creating different numbers and different comparisons, but rather using that standardized methodology. And that's why to do the baseline survey, and it doesn't have to be Sage, it may very well be, but we could hire another firm similar to them to actually do that, because that's a specialized piece of it. Now, writing the action plan, I think each action plan, let's see, you probably have as many variations on the action plan as you have climate action plans themselves. Everybody can do it their own way and what works for their particular agency.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the big picture, not our districts in particular. I'm just trying to understand how it all fits together. So there must be protocols for accounting, is what I'm thinking, that there are protocols for accounting for these things, so that our measurements conform to some standard, and then we can take those as actual examples of our progress.
It's a very well documented, is one way to put it. It's a well documented process. I used to joke that one value that I used in measuring greenhouse gases was the protocols were 500 pages long, and the value was found on page 273 of Appendix C. So it's a well-documented process. There are a lot of pages in it, and because they have to addresses many different industries. You've got oil refineries. How do you do it at an oil refinery is going to be different than a wastewater treatment plant. So there as I said, or as Sage said, the Intergovernmental Commission on Climate Change is who they are following for how to address a wastewater treatment plant.
All right. Well, that was very educational, and I appreciate the knowledge. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Weiner, for those questions. Any other questions, Director Weiner?
No.
Andrew, you were going to say something there?
I was just going to follow up a little bit on that. In the plan where we have the emissions inventory, it describes that baseline creation a little bit and some of what Tim was talking about, the equivalents. And so there's your baseline, and that's what will be used for determining the annual reductions, which is what we're talking about coming back, and we'd like to be able to report on that annually. And in that, you're not necessarily going and doing the full emission inventory, but here, we would see what has been reduced, what has been removed, but periodically you're going to have to go back and sort of reevaluate that, because we're working off of a baseline. While we have the idea that we want to be carbon neutral, what exactly does that mean? We have a baseline set of emissions here now, but if we reduced everything that we're emitting today, but we expanded and had some different operation or something else that we were doing, that could potentially increase what our actual baseline is. And so we'd have to account for those kinds of things as well. But that kind of expansion, much like with solid waste, where you try, zero isn't really zero in solid waste. I won't even go into that. But you get into all the regulatory definitions of it. This is much simpler, is that as far as the number at the end, like Tim said, we have a baseline. We know we're emitting 100 metric tons, and our goal is to emit 0. And so that's fairly straightforward, but exactly how we measure the progress along the way can be a little bit confusing. And to me, the most important thing is you're tracking the progress and identifying, you're seeing if you're making progress or falling back, which can easily happen around transportation, for example. If right now we have all these significantly reduced commutes, and we said, hey, how much progress did we make in transportation? And we say we gained an extra 2% reduction, but then next year we have more people back in the office, and we haven't, they haven't changed their personal vehicles. So now that could actually go back up a little bit. And so those kinds of variations may show up in the annual reports.
Right, but they would be identified as things we could work on.
Correct.
So, tracking it on an annual basis is a great idea, and that we have a consistent, methodology for determining what the amount of changes is really great. And after we get done with this gigantor project, then we can focus on the remaining areas that we've already called out in our in our climate action plan.
Yes, sir. And that's what, over the first 2 quarters of this next fiscal year is we really want to put in place, though, what is our procedures for this documentation and for tracking, because we know we're going to be able to track what we're doing with the Clean and Green project, but we really need to get those kinds of procedures in place. We have lots of actions that we know we're doing, but we want to make sure that we're not missing data and we're not missing that tracking. For example, energy use here, they'll evaluate all the electric and gas accounts, which is good, and we can do that and compare our usage from those accounts. But we can also make estimates from when we do a lift station rehab, and we put in a more efficient motor in there. Well, that's reducing our electric use, and you can make some estimates along those lines. But you wouldn't have the actual data unless you went and analyzed all of our electricity usage and made that comparison. So there are some things we can do as an estimate of what a project will do. This capital project will help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by X metric tons. And those are the types of things we want to be taking a look at as we design and build projects. And that would be consistent with the intent of the climate action plan, is we're supposed to factor in these considerations when we're doing these other kinds of projects and this other kind of work on all of our capital work.
So that, yeah, that brought up something. You could have just not talked, and then I wouldn't have any more questions. But now
It's okay.
we're
That's why we're
talking.
here. This is more informal. We can have a discussion. To me, that's the value of the committee meetings versus the board.
Okay,
More
well,
formal.
that reminds me. So we know that carbon sequestration is on everybody's mind because we already have put too much CO2 in the atmosphere. And the damage to our climate is already baked into what we're doing as a species, and particularly the most developed parts of the species, because Stone Age people still exist on the face of the planet, and they're not producing CO2 in the same quantities or quality. So my question was, who is, where's the technology at for carbon sequestration? Not that you have the answer. My question is, how do we look out for that? So we're apprised of changes in technology or the science regarding growing plants or soils or whatever to suck up as much CO2 out of the atmosphere as nature can. Do we have a input to our district from that kind of information?
No, I don't at this time, but I think you hit on a lot of it as plants, and actually farming is where a lot of that capability will be.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go attend the Pioneers Conference this week, and they're all about farming and that kind of thing. I just know that the oil companies are claiming they have carbon sequestration technology, and yeah, I don't know how to subscribe to that information other than by attending these kind of conferences and stuff like that. I was just wondering if there was some centralized government source or whatever that we could plug into, so we're constantly aware of how we might utilize our processes and help that along.
Yeah, I don't have anything that I can add there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Any other questions? Director Weiner?
No, unless Andrew wants to bring some up for me, I'm good at this point.
Well, let's see what we can do. Andrew, on the plan that you listed there that we adopted for charging stations, do we know we're looking at fast chargers, level 2, level 1? As we plan this out, is that all part of that? Like, try to make sure that we're on the tomorrow's technology and not today's, because today's is already outdated. So we're looking forward at that. I'm assuming we are.
Andrew looks like he might have frozen there, but
I was like, he's standing very still.
yeah, and actually he looks like he's gone now. But I know that's what's included is our level 2 chargers at the offices. But during this conversation, it made me question whether we have any chargers scheduled for down at the wastewater treatment plant and or wherever you keep your fleet vehicles. And we need to make sure that there are some chargers available for as you start changing those fleet vehicles. Level 2 are fine in most cases. Level 2 will put, let's see, 30 miles into a vehicle per hour. So a level 2 charger is fine because you use it during the day and you can charge it overnight when costs tend to be low anyway. And you can get enough electricity into those vehicles so that the next day you can operate normally and not have any issues. The level one, that's basically plug it into an outlet and you get about 3 or 4 miles per hour. And that's just not very much. That's not suitable. And then you have the high speed chargers where you can get 100 miles in 20 minutes or something like that. They take a lot of power though. And they are really, I mean, there are certainly applications. If you guys have a vehicle for some reason that's putting, 300 or 400 miles a day for some reason. I think of examples like farmers with tractors. They're high intensity, and when they got to plow a field, they need, for an electric vehicle to work, they're going to need to go back at lunch and have it charged to last the second half of the day. Those are going to be high power, super fast chargers, but most vehicles don't need that. So what we're installing at the offices are level 2.
What can we do to get at least some of the fast chargers? Because because we're installing some for employees to use as they're working, right, inside of the boundaries of our agency. But then we're also putting some on the public side. And as I drive an electric vehicle. So as I travel around, I'm always looking for on my app, like, where can I go fast charge? And while I can get over 300 miles on my car, it's always good to have that extra little power if I need it, if I'm driving a lot for that day. So as we're thinking for tomorrow, providing something that we know could be a need for the community is where I want to make sure that we're thinking, right? Not just on level 2, that could be every once in a while, but if we can have that infrastructure, because we're breaking the ground already to provide infrastructure. So if we can do, again, tomorrow's infrastructure, I think it's going to help us to be better. Even if we don't utilize it a lot, there will be some people. I know just down the street, there's a couple of fast chargers. Whenever I drive by, they have 2 that are fast chargers, and there's always at least 1 car parked there.
Yeah.
There's a
challenge. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Real quick. And I think that's something we'll have to take a close look at, President Cepeda, on what, if we install fast chargers for primarily purposes of public use or access, how much of our funds we can actually expend for that. So we might have to find, if we could find
and the fast chargers, that could be a revenue, right? I mean, small, but we can charge, right? I don't think that when the board gave the directive was to say, give away everything for free, because there are charging stations that you would pay. Like, I have subscriptions to many of them, and whenever I go somewhere, I charge. So you're just allowing me to have a place to charge, but I'm paying for it. So the agency is not necessarily money.
There's an actual practical challenge to fast chargers. Those chargers, they're 100 kW, and your whole office probably does not use 100 kW of power. There's a difference between power and energy. To have a fast charger, you have to have a lot of power that you can force into that vehicle quickly. So in order for you to install a fast charger at your office, for example, you'd probably have to update your entire electrical system. So there is this practical aspect of it. It makes sense to consider fast chargers and how they might work, but just recognize that fast chargers it's not the same as the other 2. The other 2 easily fit within the electrical system of an existing facility. The fast charger does not. It's a special thing.
Thank you for that. The other, and I know Claire might say no, but if there's a way to do maybe some EV incentives for employees, right? We know that right now everyone's working, or a lot of individuals are working remotely. If we're wanting them to maybe switch over to EVs, we can't just ask them to say, hey, go buy a car that meets our standards. But maybe there's a way, without giving public funds away, figuring out a way that we can say we're incentivizing. Like, some cities give incentives to residents. I know the state has one, the feds have one. So there's a way that we can help our employees have an incentive so they can help us meet those goals as well. So we're not putting a burden on anybody, but it's hopefully a win-win overall. And we don't have to have an answer. That's just a thought there in terms of incentives. Because I could already see Claire saying, public funds. But there might be a way.
Well, it's there are a lot of programs that had been for passes, bus passes and things like that, to have employees, get onto the bus and public transportation instead of driving their own car. And now look what COVID has done to our transportation, our public transportation network. It's really hobbled so many of the efforts that were progressing nicely. Ironically for us, a lot of that public transportation, they really weren't going to be really good options for our commute reductions. However, the remote working environments and the possibility of evaluating incentives or things like that changes the equation for us. And those are the kinds of things that would go into the action plan, identifying that, let's evaluate the possibility of the fast charger and consider, what the elements would be there. And then have some kind of a schedule in the work plan for that and prioritize, how we go about that. But those are the kinds of details we put in there and the types of updates and discussions we would want to have with this committee on a regular basis to say, what else have we thought about? Is there any other innovative ways we might want to address this?
And then the other that I saw in there was the tree planting. And if we can maybe have a schedule, because I know that we had discussed whenever the directors, for example, whenever we fly somewhere for a conference, we convert it over to CO2 and what that would do, how many trees we should plant. But we're not traveling. But I think tree planting is always great. So we should, as we reduce and we get to our goals, I think we should continue planting trees. So maybe figuring out like, what can we do as we meet our goals? We don't want to just stop doing something good. Figuring out, again, maybe a schedule, whether we travel or not, or if we travel, we plant more. And if we don't travel, we plant one. I don't know what the number is, but just something to continue all these really great ideas that are already on paper. And with COVID, right, everything has changed, which is good. It gives us an opportunity to look at it a different way.
I see Aaron starting a tree farm out there in Lagoon number 8, as we don't need to use it. I mean, I'm joking to some degree, but it's not as easy to go plant a street tree. A lot of places that can get complicated. But maybe there's a small portion of, as we transition, we're talking about using some of those lagoons and are coordinating the Clean and Green project with our Living Levee design project so that we can create some additional habitat restoration and move the footprint of the plant around a little bit. I don't know, maybe we, as part of the efforts that we're doing along the edges of our property as screening, but I don't know, we have to look at all the maintenance aspects. Well, there's a jobs program. Residents of Hayward, we can have the urban tilth come, and so Claire's over there squirming now. But
yes, urban tilth. And in our district here, especially in Hilltop, we know that Hilltop was built on top of the Chevron, right? On top of the old Chevron plant that was up here. So if you drive around, there's a lot of lots that are empty because it's all that dirt, all that dirty dirt that they couldn't use when they were building the homes, right? So I have some all around me. So figuring out, can we plant trees there, right? People are not going to be able to get and use their shade or be able to put fruit trees there, but I believe trees might be able to grow there. And it's land that nobody can use, but maybe the trees can use it, right? And we have a lot of that land all around, next to our pump station at the lake, just about, maybe 400 feet away from it is remediated land. It's a huge land owned by Chevron USA, not to be confused with Chevron Corporation or Chevron Enrichment. I had to find that out. Right, so there's a lot of land all around that we might be able to
Mhm.
utilize when we,
Yeah.
if we can't plant trees within our own area because we planted so many, just
Mhm.
figuring out other places. So that is it.
Yeah.
That's all I have on my list here for now.
Yeah, we also have,
presentation.
we will be generating a product that can remediate soil. And that is our biosolids. And they're going to be an issue in the future. So they're an issue now. And then the state is, taking our options and reducing them about where to put that and what we can use it for. And we have CASA that's working against the state's ideas so that we can use that product. So, I mean, maybe there's some partnerships with many in our area to come up with soil remediation and cogeneration and, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, the possibilities of the future are there because the future has all possibility. And, it's hard to say how we're going to plug into that, but I'm hoping we can keep our eye on the community and the world at large and figure it out.
All right. Are there no other questions or comments, Andrew? I think we go on to our next agenda item.
Yes, sir.
Next item.
Tim,
updates from
thank you so much,
agency
Tim,
manager.
for coming, by the way.
My pleasure. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, updates from the agency manager.
And we have one short update. Angela's just going to give you a little bit of information about how the PSLA implementation has been going.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me join you all today. I will be sharing a slide briefly regarding PSLA. Just a second. Okay. Oh, I'm not sure what's going on here. Hold on a second. Showing as notes, so I'm going to X out of this. We do have our slide here. You will be hearing more about this when we do our capital improvement update to the board. But I just wanted to show you projects that we're working on in fiscal year 22. And we have an asterisk here to reflect projects that will be managed under a project stabilization labor agreement. So right now, you heard a lot already about the Clean and Green project. That is one of the major projects that is under a PSLA. Lakeside force main replacement, as well as Hilltop Green force main replacement will also be PSLA as they are over the $1 million engineer's estimate. And then we do have another plant process project, which is the effluent valve replacement project, which was bidded out and under a PSLA agreement. We expected to pick up that project in the fall. That will be going on in construction in the fall. Lakeside Forest Main is already in construction. We are hoping to complete that project by the beginning of summer. And then Hilltop Green will be starting up pretty shortly. Right now, the total amount for PSLA projects is about 84 million. And the majority of that is obviously through the Clean and Green project, which is our largest project. If you have any other questions, please let me know. But right now, that is our PSLA agreement. Oh, one other update is that we did have a really good meeting with the trades for the Clean and Green project. And we've been working with them and they've been amenable to meeting with us to make sure we start our projects on time and have our pre-conference meeting as required for our project. So far the process is going well for that particular project.
Angela, Director Wiener, any questions?
Yeah, how do we monitor the contractors who are hiring? Do we communicate with the trades to see if they're satisfied with the hiring practices of our contractors so that they're meeting our PSLA agreements?
So our main obligation is to have the meeting with the trades, and we work with a representative who manages the invitees to that meeting. After that, we do have a check-in to see if they have made good faith effort to obtain those trades. But right now, the main thing is us having the meeting. So for tracking, for previous projects, we have tracked information related to the trades. But for right now, we have projects that are pretty early on. So we'll be revisiting our reporting requirements in later presentations. But right now, we just focused on the pre-conference prior to construction.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Angela. As the Trades Council said from the beginning when they were engaging with us, it was their understanding and expectations they presented to the board that they are the primary enforcement of that implementation. What we need to do is make sure that the contractor gets bound by our PSLA. And then, they go to the Trades Council and they work with them. And so that's the key thing that we're trying to monitor is, are those relationships going well? And are they able to fill the workers that we need? And the answer so far, unless Angela wants to contradict this, it has been fine. We've been getting the workforce that we need.
Thank you, Angela. Director Wiener, any other questions?
That's it.
Thank you, Angela. No questions for me. Good update. Thank you.
Thank you.
And no additional staff reports.
All right. Next agenda item, please, Ms. Martinez.
Next item is updates on matters or issues pertaining to the work of the committee.
Director Wiener, do you have anything to report?
Nope, I brought nothing today.
I've got nothing else that hasn't already been covered. Andrew, anything else on that item? Nope.
Nope, unless as a matter of what do we call it? Matter of the board. If you had any particular agenda item that you might like to see for next month, maybe we can expand upon Director Wiener was going to go to his the Bioneers conference. Maybe there's some presentations or some material or something out of that would be of interest to the committee to explore. Not necessarily something we can implement right away, but that's the other part of what we had talked about with this committee is to, have some of those discussions about what the future does look like and how we can plan for that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to give a report at the next meeting.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I hate to be the sole guy carrying the meeting, but
Well,
that's what I just
no.
volunteered for. I'll be good with it.
Well, if we can be in touch sometime before then, Director Wiener, I can talk about figure out what other agenda items we may have or some support for you on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Wiener, for volunteering for that. Ms. Martinez, next item.
Last item, adjournment.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has anything, we will adjourn.